What if one of history's most famous villains isn't who we've been told he is? In I Was Not Satan, the real story of Lucifer, Dr. W. J. Brendel traces the story of Lucifer through ancient texts, biblical translations, folklore, and centuries of tradition to separate documented history from popular belief. If you enjoy exploring mysteries with evidence instead of assumptions, this book will challenge what you think you know. I Was Not Satan, the real story of Lucifer is available now on Amazon, Barnes& Noble, and other major booksellers. Learn more at wjbrendel.com.
Welcome to Forever Paranormal, where shadows remember and silence has a way of speaking. I'm Dr. Bill, your guide through the strange and the unexplainable.
And I'm Deb. Every week we dig into what hides between belief and proof. Cryptids, hauntings, witchcraft, UFO sightings, and the stories people swear are true.
We don't tell you what to believe. We just look at what's possible, what's been witnessed, and what refuses to stay quiet.
If you like what we do, follow, rate, and share the show. It helps keep the lights on.
And if you want to go deeper, step inside the crypt. Patreon members get the show ad-free, a full day early, and gain access to our entire archives, years of investigations, bonus episodes, and conversations we don't release anywhere else. You can join at foreverparanormal.com or by searching Forever Paranormal The Crypt on Patreon.
And remember that you're never alone. If you ever need someone to talk to, the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline is 988.
What would you do if your office lights kept exploding? Not once, not twice, week after week. And electricians inspect the wiring and tell you everything looks fine. Then the power company arrives. Then the phone company. Then physicists. And somewhere along the way, people begin whispering about ghosts. Welcome back to Forever Paranormal, where we know Natinak is more than a myth, and every story is a door between worlds. And this week we step through the doors of an ordinary law office in Rosenheim, Germany, where one of the most intensely investigated poltergeist cases ever recorded forced engineers and paranormal researchers to ask the same question. Well, hello there, Deb.
Hello, Bill.
You having a good week?
So far, so good.
Mine's not too bad, but before we get into this episode, what's on your mind this week?
Let's talk about AI.
Okay.
Specifically, AI, hacking AI. The definition that I found was AI, hacking AI, refers to the use of artificial intelligence systems to autonomously discover, exploit, or bypass vulnerabilities in other AI models or infrastructure, raising significant safety concerns as these agents can operate with high autonomy. So, I wonder whether the powers that be have any regulations or plans in place to counteract such things. What I found in a search for this was that the laws and such are basically evolving as AI evolves, and this is quite disturbing to me. What about you?
All right, so you want to know my thoughts, huh?
Absolutely.
All right, well, here's where I stand on this. Yeah, AI is hacking AI. There's no safety protocols put in place right now. What's happening is when they test AI, they're supposed to have it completely separated from the internet. Well, it appears that a lot of the third-party participants where the tests are being done aren't doing that fail-safe. So it's allowing them to use them to get through to something else. Now, what disturbs me more than anything is all the creators of AI and all the CEOs of all these companies like Chat and Claude and all them, they keep saying they want the government to put in regulations and require a fail-safe. Why do they need the government to do what they are morally obligated to do? That's the part that disturbs me more than anything. They have a moral obligation to the world. Okay, well, that's my thoughts.
I agree to them.
Okay, that's enough on my soapbox, so we're going to move on here. All right, Deb, getting away from AI, like I said, let me ask you something. If the lights started flickering in our house tonight, what would be your first thought?
Honestly, I'd look at you and ask, since you're an electrician years back and just did some wiring not long ago, what did you do?
Fair enough.
After that, I would make sure I paid the power bill.
Well, yeah, and that's exactly where this story begins. Nobody thought of ghosts. Nobody thought of demons. Nobody thought of a poltergeist. They thought they had an electrical problem. In the fall of 1967, attorney Sigmund Adam operated a busy law office in Rosenheim, which is a quiet Bavarian town southeast of Munich. It was the kind of office where clients came to discuss wills and contracts and property disputes and all kinds of ordinary legal business. Secretaries answered telephones, typists prepared documents. Every day looked much like the one before it. Until it didn't. At first, the problems were annoying more than alarming. Light bulbs would burst or fail, then more light bulbs failed. All the electrical equipment kind of behaved unpredictably. That alone wouldn't have raised many eyebrows, I'm sure, but because electrical faults happen. And the first assumption was that the office had a wiring problem, which is easy to understand for me because this office was relatively new and maybe all the bugs just weren't worked out yet.
Well, that's where I'd be. Call an electrician and get on with your day.
They did, yeah. Electricians inspected the wiring, connections were checked, fixtures were examined. The office was tested from one end to the other with nothing obvious being explained or explaining what was happening. Then the problems became harder to ignore. Because instead of simply burning out, the fluorescent tubes reportedly began twisting inside the fixtures. They would turn so they wouldn't make contact and work. And then the breakers would trip for no apparent reason. Employees never knew whether the lights would work normally or whether there'd be another loud pop and send glass raining into the floor or anything like that.
And I'd be getting irritated at this point.
Well, yeah, maybe even a little nervous or something.
Nervous because things keep breaking?
Yeah, more because nobody can tell you why they're breaking. There's a difference. If your mechanic, for example, says, here's the problem, you may not like paying a bill, but at least you know what's wrong. I just had that. Imagine hearing instead, we've checked everything and we don't know. That uncertainty has a way of getting into your head.
Especially in an office. You're trying to work while wondering what's going to happen next.
Exactly. I mean, the disruptions continued. Clients even noticed them. Employees talked about them. What had started as some kind of small inconvenience was becoming a genuine business problem. Then something happened that changed the entire investigation. The telephones.
I think that's the part of this case I find the strangest.
Me too. I mean, at first the office phones rang unexpectedly, calls were interrupted, lines behaved erratically. Again, nobody jumped to a paranormal conclusion. Of course, what they do, they called a telephone company.
Which is what anybody would do.
Right. But then the monthly bill arrived. Instead of showing the normal business amount of calls and traffic you'd expect from an office, it contained hundreds of calls that nobody in the office remembered making. Many of them weren't random numbers either. They had all been placed to one destination, Germany's speaking clock.
Apparently, that's an actual service people used before smartphones. You'd dial a number and a recorded voice would tell you the exact time.
Exactly. It sounds strange today, but it was common then in most cities and stuff. You may not have had it back in the sticks where you grew up, Deb, but
No.
what wasn't common was seeing your office apparently call the service over and over and over again. According to the records, dozens of those calls were made during periods where employees insisted nobody had touched the telephones. One sequence reportedly showed 46 calls in just 15 minutes.
On old style rotary phones?
Yeah, that's what made technicians stop and pay attention. Anyone who's old enough to remember rotary dialing knows it isn't fast. You placed your finger in a hole where the number was, you turned the dial, you let it return, then you repeated the process for every single number. Making 46 separate calls in 15 minutes would have been difficult even if someone had been trying to do it.
So now you have something more than people saying, I think I saw something. You've got billing records saying that it happened.
Yeah, exactly. The telephone company couldn't simply dismiss the complaint because the records existed. The calls had been billed. Somehow they had been made, right? And that was the moment this story stopped being an office with electrical problems and became something much larger. Because the electricians hadn't found an answer. Now the telephone company was looking for one. And before long, another group would arrive. Not ghost hunters, but engineers from the local utility company carrying instruments designed to record exactly what the electricity was doing. One of the reasons this case has survived for nearly 60 years is because it didn't stay inside the law office. The problems had reached a point where outside companies couldn't simply just shrug it off and walk away, right? If there really was an electrical fault somewhere, it needed to be found. For safety reasons, if nothing else. If there wasn't, they needed to understand why the equipment was behaving the way it was. So the local utility company sent engineers.
And those weren't people looking for ghosts.
Not at all. Their job was to determine whether electricity entering the building was doing something it shouldn't. They approached it exactly the way you'd expect engineers to approach any service problem. The municipal utility installed recording instruments that continuously monitored the electrical supply. Instead of relying on what someone thought they saw, they wanted hard data. If the voltage surged, dipped, fluctuated, or anything like that, the instruments would record it.
That's a big step.
It is, and it tells you the utility believes something unusual was happening. Companies don't normally dedicate equipment and personnel to one single office because a few light bulbs burned out. They expected to find an explanation. But instead, the mystery deepened. The recording equipment reportedly captured sudden, dramatic fluctuations in electrical load that couldn't be tied to any of the normal office activity. Yet, the technicians inspected the wiring again. They still couldn't identify a conventional fault capable of producing what the instruments had recorded. A lot of times you get something like that. It's a loose main lug or something, but they couldn't find any of that.
That's where my brain would start getting frustrated.
Mine too. Because instruments don't care what people believe. They simply record what's happening now. Whether those recordings prove anything paranormal is an entirely different question.
Exactly. Strange readings don't automatically mean ghosts.
No, but they do mean something deserves an explanation, Deb. While the engineers were trying to understand the electrical side of the problem, the office staff was still dealing with increasingly bizarre events around them. Light fixtures would reportedly swing without anyone touching them. Pictures hanging on the walls kind of rotated on their hooks. Employees described loud bangs echoing through the office for no obvious reason. The drawers would open unexpectedly. Even a heavy filing cabinet was reportedly seen moving.
That's a long way from resetting a breaker.
It is, but one incident stands out because it was so messy. The office photocopier. Instead of simply jamming or refusing to work, the copier reportedly sprayed its developing fluid across part of the room.
I'm sure that wouldn't be easy to clean up.
No, and anyone who's worked around an older office equipment and older copiers, they know the developer can get anywhere. It's a liquid, and imagine trying to explain to a client why the copier suddenly covered part of your office in black developing fluid.
I'd probably be shopping for a new copier.
And what if replacing it didn't fix it?
Then I'd start wondering what else was going on.
Well, that's where these employees found themselves, Deb. Any one of these incidents could itself be probably explained away: a defective copier, loose picture hooks, faulty lighting, faulty wiring, telephone problems. The difficulty was they all seemed to be happening in the same office during roughly the same period, while repeated inspections kept coming back with no satisfactory answers.
I think that's something people miss when they hear the story. If I told you one light bulb exploded, you'd shrug. If I told you the phone company found unusual calls, you'd probably blame the equipment. If I told you a picture rotated on the wall, you'd wonder if the nail was loose. But when all of those things happen together,
Yeah, I know. You stop looking at each event by itself, right? You start asking whether they're connected. That was exactly the question the investigators were beginning to ask, because as technicians spent more time inside the office, another pattern slowly emerged. The disturbances didn't appear to happen equally around everyone. Several investigators noticed that many of the incidents seemed to occur when one employee was nearby. A 19-year-old legal assistant named Anne Marie Schrabel.
that's interesting. Was she the cause? Or was she simply present because she worked there every day?
Well, that's the right question, and that's one of the biggest questions in this entire case. Nobody suggested she was consciously making light bulbs explode or telephones dial by themselves. Instead, some investigators began considering the idea that had existed in parapsychology for decades at that point, that certain poltergeist cases might somehow center around a particular individual without that person having any awareness or control.
Not a ghost attached to a building, more like something attached to a person.
Yeah, or perhaps something originating from a person. That's an important distinction there, Deb, because at this point in the investigation, nobody knew which possibility, if either, was correct. What they did know was that the apparent connection kept showing up often enough that it couldn't simply be ignored. Of course, not everyone agreed with that conclusion, right? Some investigators believed they were seeing the first clues pointing towards something far less mysterious. Not a haunting, not psychokinesis, but a very human explanation. And before long, one of Germany's best known paranormal researchers would step into the middle of that debate, bringing international attention to a law office that had only wanted someone to fix its lights.
I would guess it's time to bring someone with a different set of skills in.
Yep. By the late 1960s, if you lived in Germany and you thought you had experienced something pretty weird and paranormal, there was one name that came up again and again: Professor Hans Bender.
Never heard of him, so I don't know anything about him.
Well, I'll tell you a little bit about him. Bender was a psychologist and one of Europe's best known parapsychologists. He had spent years investigating reports of hauntings, apparitions, and what people commonly call poltergeist activity. To believers, he was one of the few academics willing to take these cases seriously. To skeptics, he was someone willing to try and explain and accept extraordinary claims. Either way, he was no stranger to controversy, because when word of the Rosenheim disturbances reached him, he saw something different from the average ghost story. Here was a case that already involved electricians, already involved telephone technicians and engineers. Measurements that had been taken, utility records existed, and telephone records existed. This wasn't simply someone saying they had heard footsteps in an old house.
He was walking into an investigation that was already underway.
Exactly. And that's important because Bender didn't create the case. He entered a case that had already had multiple outside agencies asking questions. So over the following weeks, the law office became an unusual meeting place. Employees continued trying to do their jobs, of course, and clients came and went. And meanwhile, technicians checked equipment, engineers monitored electrical systems, and paranormal investigators watched for patterns.
That's got to be one of the strangest office environments I've ever heard of.
Yeah, I mean, can you imagine walking in to have your will updated and you find engineers staring at electrical meters in the law office,
I'd be wondering whether I should come back another day or find another attorney.
or whether another day would be any different. Maybe the other attorney idea? That might not be too bad when it comes to something like that. And then, according to the reports from the investigation, unusual incidents continued even when people were watching. Pictures reportedly turned on the wall, light fixtures would still swing, and telephones still behaved erratically. Employees described loud cracking sounds that seemed to come from nowhere. Some visitors claimed they witnessed events firsthand. Others, they said they saw absolutely nothing.
Which would make it more frustrating, I would imagine. If things were happening every 5 minutes, you'd eventually figure something out. Instead, it seems like they were spending a lot of time waiting.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the challenges with cases like this. Because whatever was happening wasn't performing on command for them. Some days were relatively quiet, while other days, several incidents reportedly occurred within a very short period of time. Imagine trying to investigate something that refuses to follow a schedule.
Like studying lightning. You know it exists, you just don't know exactly when it's going to strike.
Well, yeah, that's actually a pretty good comparison. Because as the investigation continued, Bender became increasingly interested in something investigators had already noticed. He started looking at 19-year-old Anna Marie Schrabel. Reports suggested that many of the disturbances seemed to occur when she was nearby. Not all of them, not every single time, but often enough that investigators began paying close attention.
How did she react to all of this?
From the accounts I've read, she didn't appear to enjoy the attention, that's for sure. Think about it. You're a young legal assistant trying to start your career. Suddenly, newspaper reporters are interested in where you work and scientists are watching you. People began wondering whether strange events somehow follow you around, and that's not exactly the kind of publicity most 19-year-olds hope for.
Especially if you feel you've done nothing wrong.
I mean, right. Bender considered whether this might fit a pattern reported in other alleged poltergeist cases, because for decades, some researchers had suggested that certain cases seem to center around adolescents or young adults experience significant emotional stress. The theory was called recurrent spontaneous psychokinesis, or RSPK. The idea was controversial then, and I have to admit it's still controversial today. The basic proposal was that intense, unconscious psychological stress might somehow produce physical effects in the environment.
That's a pretty incredible claim.
It is, and I do want to stress something here though, Deb. There has never been scientific consensus that RSPK even exists. It's one proposed explanation within parapsychology, but it's not an established fact. I'm a parapsychologist. I don't know if I believe in it.
So Bender wasn't saying we've solved the mystery. He was saying this might fit a pattern I've seen before.
Exactly. And that's really a very different statement because while Bender was considering psychokinesis, other investigators were moving in a completely different direction. They weren't asking whether Anne Marie was unknowingly producing the disturbances. They were asking whether someone in the office might be producing them intentionally.
In other words, could this be a hoax?
Exactly, because before you accept an extraordinary explanation, you have to eliminate the ordinary ones. Could someone have manipulated the light fixtures? Yeah. Could someone interfere with the telephones? Yeah. Could some of the dramatic events have been staged while everyone's attention was focused somewhere else? I mean, those questions are unfair. In fact, they were exactly the questions investigators should have been asking.
And that's where this story splits in two. One group starts looking for evidence of psychokinesis, the other starts looking for deception.
Yeah, and here's what's fascinating. Neither side completely convinced the other. Nearly 60 years later, people are still arguing over the same evidence, reaching completely different conclusions, which means the most controversial chapter of the Rosenheim case was still ahead.
So, where does the skeptical investigation begin?
Well, right where you expect it to. Critics argue that if something appears impossible, you don't begin looking for paranormal explanations. You begin by asking whether someone could have created the illusion. Over time, several investigators claimed to find evidence suggesting at least some of the incidents had been staged. There were nylon threads that were reportedly discovered attached to objects that appeared to move on their own. One investigator claimed to have caught Anne Marie manipulating an event. Others argued that at least some of the electrical recordings could have resulted from ordinary causes or even maybe deliberate interference.
That sounds pretty damaging.
It certainly damaged the case, but here's where it gets complicated. None of those findings explained everything everyone had reported over the previous weeks. I mean, were events faked? Possibly. Were all of them? Well, that's where people still disagree.
It reminds me of something we've talked about before. Just because you can explain one event doesn't automatically explain every event.
Exactly. Imagine investigating a bank robbery and proving one witness remembered the getaway car incorrectly. That doesn't prove the robbery never happened. The same principle should apply here. If one incident was staged, that certainly affects the credibility of the investigation, but it doesn't automatically account for every telephone record, every engineering observation, or every witness or every reported disturbance. On the other hand, if someone intentionally created even part of the mystery, it also becomes much harder to know which events deserve serious consideration.
And that's the problem, isn't it? Once doubt enters the picture, it spreads everywhere.
It does, and that's why Rosenheim continues to divide researchers. Some point to the involvement of utility engineers, telephone technicians, and physicists, and argue that this was one of the strongest documented poltergeist cases ever investigated. Others point to the allegations of fraud and conclude the mystery was solved decades ago. Both groups are looking at much of the same evidence, they were simply weighing it differently.
So, where are you on this one?
Honestly, I don't know. I think that's the only answer the evidence allows me to give. I mean, there's enough documented investigation here that I can't dismiss the case with a wave of my hand. At the same time, there are enough legitimate questions that I can't call it proof of the paranormal either.
We probably should mention one more thing before we wrap up.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing because in January of 1968, Anne Marie left the law office to be married.
And that's when everything stopped?
Yeah, according to reports, the disturbances that had disrupted the office for months came to an abrupt end. The lights stopped acting up, the strange telephone activity ended, the office returned to normal.
That seems like a very important piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, it is, but it doesn't settle the mystery, because if you accept Hans Bender's interpretation, Anne Marie's departure supports the idea that she somehow was the focus of the phenomena. If you lean toward the skeptical side, her leaving could just as easily explain why the disturbances ended if someone had been creating them intentionally.
So even the ending points in two different directions, depending on what you already believe.
Exactly. I mean, the final chapter of this case is just as open to interpretation as the first chapter. For me, Rosenheim isn't compelling because it proves ghosts exist. It's compelling because intelligent people, trained observers, engineers, and investigators spent an incredible amount of time trying to understand what happened and still couldn't produce an explanation that everyone accepts.
I think that's what makes this case different from many others. It's not really about ghosts, it's about uncertainty.
Exactly. I mean, we all like mysteries. When they stay in the books or movies, of course, right? It's a lot less comfortable when they happen in a working law office. Can you imagine going into work like that, Deb? I mean, it involves utility companies. It generates stacks of telephone records and leaves experts arguing over almost 60 years. Maybe there was a perfectly ordinary explanation waiting to be discovered. Maybe there wasn't. What we can say with confidence is that Rosenheim case remains one of the most unusual intersections of engineering, psychology, and the paranormal ever investigated. And, as always, we'll leave the final verdict where it belongs, with you. Well, at least until next time when we discuss another tale yet to be told. Thanks for listening to Forever Paranormal. Follow, rate, and share the show. It helps others find us and keeps the stories coming. Step inside the crypt for archive and exclusive episodes at foreverparanormal.com. And keep up with my latest books and research at wjbrendel.com. And until next time, remember, the veil is always thinner than you think.